All right, guys, we are going to go through the exercise of exception handling. So I'm going to pull up a new Visual Studio window. But before we do that, we're going to do one extra thing that we haven't did this semester at all. Come on, hide me, man, hide me, hide me. How is that thing not stop? You guys don't see that. Okay, so just me, that's good. All right, so first thing I would recommend, and I already have this installed, but let me if you're following along in class, that's fine. Go out to Nodejs. So there's a website called nodejs.org. We'll learn about this in advanced programming, but for what we're doing tonight, we just need it a little bit. We're not going to set up an environment or nothing like that. We're just going to use the services that it offers. But before we do that, has anyone ever heard of Node.js before? Do you know what it is? Anyone explain it? Ben?
I think, doesn't it let you run JavaScript without having to use a web browser?
Absolutely, it does. So yes, it allows you to okay, that is so weird. It allows us to run JavaScript instead of using our web browser. So Node.js is a web host it's a web host provider per se, you can say. So go down the road a little bit, rewind a little bit. So coming up in technology, myself, I grew up. Geez, I was mainly in either a .NET, probably like .NET or Java background. That's usually my background in programming. But early on, it was ASP.NET, and we used something called IIS that would run on a Windows server that allow you, and I think you mentioned it, allow you to run your websites. And then Java, we used Apache. But Node.js came into the business, which opened up a lot of different doors. So it also allowed Microsoft to compete with other providers because traditionally ASP.NET only runs on a Windows. You can't run on a Mac, but like Java could run on any platform. So ASP.NET came up with something called ASP.NET Core that runs on Node.js, and it allows them to open up funnel their application. And the cool thing about them coming up with this, they also developed a lightweight, because I don't know, has anyone in here ever used Visual Studios on Windows computer? It's got a lot of cool stuff it could do, but it takes up a lot of memory and a lot of space. And that's what I grew up using. It's an awesome tool. But then they came up with this lightweight thing that we use for Visual Studio Code, which is so awesome because you could use it for any programming language. It doesn't have to be .NET, it could be Java, it could be Python, it could be, you name it could be all these different languages. And so you only have to use one tool versus having to learn a new tool. Now at work, we're in the process of, we're going to use Java, we're using Java, and we're going to use Eclipse. But if we really wanted to, we could use this editor. So that's the nice thing about it. It's lightweight, it doesn't take a lot of, in this class before we used Atom, and then we switched Atom to Visual Studio Code, and if you ever watch YouTube videos, you'll see that everyone else is doing the same thing. They're using Visual Studio Code for everything. But anyways, getting back to that, for what we're going to do tonight for testing purposes, we're going to install, and I already have this installed, so I'm not going to run through it, but once you pull this up, you have the option to choose. I would choose recommended for most versus latest, because latest comes with bugs and we don't want bugs. So just choose the latest, whether you're running it on a Mac or PC. So mine automatically detects that I'm using a PC, or a Mac, oh my god. So it tells me to choose the Mac. If you're using a PC, it will be the PC method. So you want to download that, and that will have some information that allows us to do what we need to do. If anyone's not following along, then I'll just go on to the next part. So that would be the first thing you have to download. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and create a new folder for this code. Oh my god. I think I have a point park folder here. And I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call it exception handling. You guys want me to zoom this in? I forgot to zoom it in. That is on me. Is that better? It might not be for me, but it might be better for you. All right, so we created that exception handling, and I am going to come over to Visual Studios. You guys don't see that crazy window I see. I'm going to click over here, and I'm just going to open that folder, which is right here, exception handling, and hit OK. Perfect. Later. You guys with me? So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to extensions, and I'm going to type in something called, oh geez, I already forgot the name of it, Code Run, I think. Code Runner. I already have it installed, but click on Code Runner. If you don't have it installed, it'll allow you, it'll have an install button here. You'll just install it. So I do have it installed. This will allow us to run JavaScript. So it'll allow us to run JavaScript in as long as we have Node running installed. So that would be the next thing I would do is install Code Runner. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Terminal at the top and do New Terminal. And a couple things I'm going to do is I'm going to do a PWD just to see I'm in the directory. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify if I have Node installed. Oh, you guys already see it. Big enough. If you type in Node-V, it'll tell you what version of Node that you have installed. So if you did install it, I would recommend pulling up Terminal or pulling up MS-DOS or pulling up what is it, PowerShell, and running that. PowerShell would be a good one. Running Node-V, and it'll show you what version of Node that you have, so that way you can identify that Node is installed. I think you could also do npm-v, and that's the package manager for this, and that's 8.5.5, and that's what we did in order to download Code Run. We use the npm package from over here, and that's what it uses basically. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you have an older version?
Probably, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the new.
16.14.
What is it?
Mine's 16.14.2.
Yeah, I need to update mine. So we'll see if mine even works. All right. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if the darn thing works. So I'm gonna create a file or folder. So I'll just call it JS as normal, and then within JS I'll create a file, and I'll call it runtest.js. All right, so I'm just going to do something simple here. I'm going to type in, and hopefully you guys can see, I'm going to type in something, console.log hello out. I'll just say, does this work? Nope. Do you see this? All right, so I typed in, do you see this? And then there should be a run button over here, or a play button, and I should be able to click on it. Let me clear this. I should be able to click on this play button up here, and what happened here? Oh, you know what? So, I'll show you something. So I clicked up run code, and it showed running Node and had the location where the file's at. And it said done, exited code. So here's the problem. I didn't save it, so that might have helped. because it doesn't know it exists. So let me try it again. So I'll go back into the code and I'll click the code button, the run button. Now this time it worked. As you see here, it says, do you see this? So this time it works. I'm going to click the debug console, yeah. Pull up the terminal again. So now I got a clear screen. Boom. Oops. We'll try this one more time. So, yep. Yep, come on, go away. All right. So I'll click the run over here, and you see it does work. It says, do you see this? Perfect. So this is good because now we know that we can test it in here. We know that if we go out to Google Chrome, it'll work on Chrome. It's fine. Those who are doing class, did you get it to work? All right, good. All right, cool. All right, so then we could all right, so now we can create our first file. So we're going to call it try.js. And so this will be our first, what we'll do is we'll just write the exception handling around it, and then we can talk about where you can put it at in your code. It's just like anytime that you want to execute something. So for example, let's say that we have a process and it's called create accounts. And then create accounts means what? We pass in maybe a username and password like we did here. So let's say hypothetically we have this function called create accounts, and create accounts is accepting, I should do this on the screen, is accepting a username and a password. So we know that if we call this, we're going to pass in the username and the password. And so what we could have around this is we could have a try. So what it's going to do is it's going to try to commit that function. It's going to try to accomplish something. If it can't accomplish it, then that's great. We have this process set up so we could follow the methodology to open error message. So the user is aware that, hey, there's a problem, blah, blah, blah. And it's important because I'm going to put this on the screen as well real quick. So let me put this in Sublime. All right. So let's say, like I said, we have a function. Function is called create accounts. And so we have this function called create accounts, and we're expecting someone to pass us a username and a password. Okay. And so in order to make this work, if we just say, let's say the first thing that we did is person logs in to the screen. Well, let's say person creates an account, right? And then they call this right here. They call this method, and then what's going to happen? It's going to, this is going to call this method, call this function, and execute it. Let's say that that function has some code in it that's wrong. So let's say, for example, the function is called function create accounts, and then we have a parameter we'll say param user, and then we have param password. We'll say pass. And in here, we have some type of error in our code. Let's say that we forgot to put the code in. Forgot to put code in, or that developer didn't work on this. But basically, it doesn't exist. Okay, there's no code there that exists. So what happens is when they call the function, it blows up. Now, if you don't have an exception handling process there, what do you think happens? The screen blows up, gives you some funky message, and you don't know what happens. You don't know what goes on. You don't ever want the user experiencing the funky message. A, if you're a developer, it's going to make you look bad. B, overall as an organization or company, it makes you look bad because you're putting bad code out there and you're not catching it and you're not providing feedback or whatever the case is. One of the things that you always want to do, and you'll learn when everyone's had a database class, but no one's actually wrote code to a database, and maybe you have, I don't know. But one of the things that you want to do is when these things happen, you want to capture them. When the error message happens, you want to save it to 2 locations. You'll learn about log files. You want to save it to a log file, maybe it's locally. Some companies use third-party tools, and maybe you have that software installed and that third party is doing all the work for you. Like there's tools out there called Splunk. There's tools out there called Datadog. They are popular tools, or some of many tools, that will save that information. You could go out to a nice fancy screen and look at all your data, and if there's like an alert that happens, like for example, let's say that an error happened on a website, you'll get an alert, maybe it sends you a text to your phone that says, hey, we have a problem, maybe the site's down, stuff like that. And that's how, that's a whole other subject, but that's you never want to have that. So just pointing that out. All right, so let's go over to the code here. And so the first thing I'll type in here is try. Yeah. Quit arguing with me. All right, so I type in the word try, and then I'll put this right here. So this means I'm trying to do something. So in this case, we'll say we're trying to do console log, and we'll just say starting the engine up. Simple stuff. Yeah. All right. So we do it this right here, and then we could add something called catch. The word catch means, you're catching the exception that happened. If there's a, don't put V, my screen's key's messed up. So you type in catch, and then in parentheses, you'll put error. As you see here, it automatically highlights it, log error to console. Okay, so I don't need console dot, I don't know why I did that, I just want error message. And I don't know why I did that, I just want that right there. For some reason it tried to do something else. We'll see if it works though. So we catch the error, and then maybe we'll want to write something here. We could say console.log, and we could say error message. So we want to put the error message on the screen. Expect it. Oh, okay. No. That should work like that. Let's see here. I must have did something goofy. Oh, you know what? It'd be nice if I could type. So I had to go that way and that way, and it was expecting something. That's why I had that console.log. I was trying to write something. So if you look here, we have this piece of code here. We're trying to do something, and what we're trying to do console.log starting the engine up. Now, this is the first execution that we make. If there was a problem with it, it would catch it right here. Like, put it in this error message, and you see here, this is already a defined variable, defined property within system. So think of it as a system property that's picked up. So if that gets logged, it's going to log that message, and we're going to display something on the screen, whatever that message is. And so when you're building software, this is highly recommended. I don't know how many times I've worked for a company where I came in and I'm looking at the code as a developer, and I'm like just amazed. I'm like, there's no error handling. Or like, yeah, because we're just so busy and we're just like pumping stuff out. And I'm like, well, what if something breaks? Or like, we got this fixed process. We make sure that we test everything. It'll never break. Well, that's silly. It's like trying to think of a good example. It's like you're driving down the road with your vehicle, and you're like, I never have to use the park. You just literally open the door and get out. They're like, because it works. That sounds silly for somebody jumping out of their vehicle while it's in drive, or whatever. I'm sure there are a number of different things that people do crazy in a vehicle. So you want to capture this information. Now, if we run this, it should work. It should stop right here because it's going to try this. And if think of this like an if statement. You know, like when you do an if, or like if value equals this, then this happens, or else. And you know the first thing it checks, if it works, fine, everyone's happy, doors closed, program ends, we don't care. And that's how this works as well. So I'll click the run button here. Guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to save the darn thing. All right. All right, so I saved it. Now let's run it. So starting engine up, perfect. So it started engine up because, why? Because it knew that there was nothing to error out. So the code worked as expected. No problems, nothing. Everything's good. Now, did everyone run it who's trying to follow along? All right. And if you don't have this set up, you could also go, just to show you a trick here. If you don't have this set up, you could go out to Chrome and run the same thing that we're doing in class here. So you can come out to Chrome and you could just do inspect. You can come over to, oh my God, I can't see it, console, because it's so big. All right, well, you can come over to console, you get my gist, you can run it in here. I can't because I have the screen so large I can't even see it. That's what happens when you do this. All right, so now we're gonna throw a wrench in here. So we're gonna tell it to do something that doesn't exist. We're gonna say create accounts, like we mentioned. Oops. So we're not even gonna pass any parameters. We're just gonna say create accounts. And so it should blow up because we have no account to create. It doesn't, we don't have a function going anywhere. It doesn't recognize it. So if I hit run, we get a funky error message. And this is good because we get this error message. Hopefully you guys can see it. It does take up a lot of screen, but let me actually copy it out of here and throw it over here. So let's create a new tab, paste it. All right, so reference error, create accounts is not defined. And so it gives a bunch of crazy messages, which is what normally happens. But the one that you're really interested in is a reference error message. All the other stuff mean not a lot, to be honest with you. So the first one says create accounts is not defined. So if you're a software developer, you get a notification, your boss says, hey, Colin, the page is not working. There's a problem. Can you go out and check it out? So you go out to the logs, you read this, you're like, okay, it's not created. What's that mean? And you go out to the page, and you're like, holy heck, no one even created the account. It doesn't exist. Now, if we had the function out there, it would exist. But if we created a function out there and put it out there and called it, it would call it, but there would be no code in there. So it would still give you some type of similar message to this as well. So you would know, okay, I need to create a function. But the problem is, you're like, maybe you're one of many developers. Let's say that, and this happens so often. Let's say that you did a new release. Let's say it's a release at your stage environment. So it's, it's only affecting stage users, not a big deal. And maybe just stage users or testers, okay? And you see that, and Colin's like, okay, what is going on? I don't know what's going on. So then you look at typically what people have is they have some type of log, whether you're using Atlassian Jira, or you're using ADO, Azure DevOps, or some other project tool. Maybe it's just Excel or Microsoft project, whatever the case is, and you're looking at your current sprint or current work that the team's working on, and you're like, okay, Bob was supposed to create this function accounts. Why did he not create it? So then you have to get in touch with Bob and say, Bob, we have a problem. Why is this not created? Blah, blah, blah. These are things that should have been crossed off and checked off before the code went up to the staging environment. But trust me, these things happen quite often, believe it or not. And you, maybe being the on-call person, you have to go out and create the code and have it do something on the fly, just to kind of keep the page flowing, keep the traffic flowing, and you know, you make sure you disable that feature for someone to not be able to create accounts, whatever the case is. So having this information is very helpful to basically debug what the problem is. So when I worked for PNC Bank, we had a rotation. There was let's see, me, Eric, Dwayne, Jim. There was 5 developers. So I was one of 5 developers on the team, maybe 6. Can't remember the other person. And what we would do is we would rotate. We'd have a primary and a secondary. And so basically so we had 6 developers. So every 3 weeks you were on call. So what would happen is, like, the 3rd week you would be the secondary on call. And then after that, the next week you would be the primary, and so forth. So you'd have a couple weeks off, and then you'd be primary once, and you'd be secondary. And all that means is if they call the primary, and trust me, they don't call at good times. They call 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, your phone's ringing. My wife would shut it off on purpose, I think, sometimes. And I'd wake up the next morning and wouldn't even know what happened. So anyways, so if the primary missed it, the secondary would have to get it. And if the secondary missed it, then the manager would get it, and then you know how that goes. It just doesn't it gets worse every miss. But ultimately, you'd be on call to fix problems like this. And so I'll never forget, this is, I can't remember the year, I think it was 2012, maybe. My background in mainframe is not that great. I never really had a background. Actually, I never had a background in mainframe. I did a little mainframe way back in the day, but not enough to even survive. So one of the problems was our group was doing crash training. So I was hired to be a distributor developer to handle all the front-end .NET stuff. And so we did crash training. I taught them how to do .NET. They taught me how to do mainframe. And so when I went on call, I had to at least have an idea what happened. So it's July 3rd, and it's 2:30 in the morning. And so I spent about an hour working on a problem. And it's a debug, so I was able to get the logs just like this. There was a way to look logs, but it meant nothing to me. And I tried to fix it as much as possible. That call, I had to include 3 other people on my team, my secondary and 2 other people. That call didn't last until 6:30 p.m. on July 4th. Yeah, ruined 4th of July. But these are things that happen. And the reason being was there was something about 20 applications upstream that blew up. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was something similar to this. There was a method that was supposed to do something. I don't remember exact statistics of it, but the person didn't check in that code. And since it didn't check in, it just messed everything up downstream, and all these apps were messed up. And so it messes up the bank and all the other stuff that happens. So the reason I'm telling you about this is because these things really happen, and I've been involved, and that was a production environment, and that was a cluster, you know what. So, you know, be careful. It happens when it happens. Just remember me telling you about it, because just relax, deal with it. This is why you sign up if you want to be a software developer, this is why you did it, because of fun times like this. Any questions on that? All right. And I didn't tell you about the guy I woke up who just came in from a concert. So he did not like me for a while. All right, going back to this. All right, so we have this error message. So obviously we know how to fix it. That's not a problem. So just to be dumb, I'm just going to add some values and see if we get different error message. So we'll say Bob, and password is 1234. Perfect. I'm gonna save it. I just want to see if I get a different error message. So if I run it, let's see if I get the same message or something different. Okay, it's down here. So I did get looks like I All right, so I got the same message. It wasn't nothing different. It said create account is not defined. It doesn't say we're accepting parameters, nothing like that. So that's fine. So you see that how this works, where you get the error message if it doesn't or does exist. And this will be something I'm looking for when you do your presentation. I'm also looking for you to do something like this, that where something doesn't exist, you try to display it or not display it, whatever the case is. So now let's change. We'll save this as is, like this. Save that, sure. So let's create a new file here, and I'm going to call this. So this will be the second thing that we learn. It's called finally. And it's another way of writing code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this code that we had for the try catch. Instead of having to write it all over again, I'm just going to paste it over here, and finally, we're just going to change things up a little bit. So I'm going to do, instead of create accounts, I'm going to say delete account, and then I'm just going to pass in Bob, and Bob's up to no good, and his password. Well, we'll just put this. We'll say username is Bob Smith 1234. That's his user account, and maybe his email address or his ID. We'll say his ID is 90210. All right. So that's his account number and his username. So that maybe we do that first. So let's control that. So user account, and then the username that goes with that. There we go. All right. So that's the first thing that we're going to try to do. Then we're going to catch the error message, and then also we're going to have a finally. So we're going to say, all right, finally, and we could do, yeah, sure. We could do console.log, and I'll explain what this does. Stopping the engine. So what typically happens on well, let me ask you, has anyone ever heard of this term finally before? So typically what happens is when you're doing this, you try to do something, and if it doesn't work, great, you catch the message, you can do whatever you want to do with it. At this point, you caught it. Finally, what we could do here is, let's say hypothetically speaking, let's say that we had this API that we could call, and or even this module, and we'll say it's let's see, all right, let's do this. Log message, and then you throw an error message. So let's say that we have this function right here called log message. So this log message might be a function that does a couple things. Ultimately, it saves the data to a database. And let's say that we're using this Datadog or Datadog or Splunk. And so this function might, and within the function there might be an API, and that we call the invoked API, and we pass in the value, which is the error message, which captures our error. So now we have it stored in this database, and they're using MongoDB, for example, and we're able to go out to our website that has the Splunk, I'll get to you in a second, or the Datadog, and we could display the error message. This is something that companies want to retain, what error message is out there. So that would be step number one. Question.
Is there a reason why under finally we use the one dash mark for the stopping the engine?
Say that again, I'm not sure how I follow.
Is there a reason why we have, what is that, the one apostrophe for stopping the engine under finally?
Yeah, there's a reason. So finally basically means, so you know how like when we ran the error message and it stopped and it blew up the error message? What finally does is it keeps going on. So it's like a reiteration. So yeah, it does stop the error message, but it commits that last thing that you want to happen. So it's like that last thing that you want to happen. So for example, engine shuts off, we could do that. And that's why I was explaining with the log error message. We could call a feature that logs the message to an API, or maybe displays a screen. So for example, you don't want the user to get that, pickup screen that we talked about, you want to provide a nice user screen. So maybe the next thing first thing I always tell people is log it. And the second thing is, if it's a user screen, display something on the screen. So maybe you have a template page that has something, and maybe you pass in a parameter, that error message, and it brings up something. And maybe you have in this case, maybe you have a switch statement, and you identify, hey, if it equals this, then I want this message to pop up, like a nice friendly message. Hey, we're doing some update on our database. Please ignore our something. And nice pretty message. And basically, you're like, okay, they're effed, but you're displaying some nice creative. Maybe you're a company like I don't know. Maybe you're trying to think of Duck Donuts, for example. Maybe you're like Duck Donuts, and you're like, hey, during this time, go out to this and get a free donut on us or something while you wait, or something like that. So that's what the finally is for, is being able to execute that last thing that you want to happen. Because typically when we ran the try, we couldn't. It just threw up the error message. So we can't run the log because we don't have anything in place for that. So I'm just going to comment that out. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
So if I hit save, we know it's going to blow up because it doesn't work. But let's go down here, and you see that it blows up. It says delete account doesn't exist, does the error message, and then at the end here it stops the engine. So it just shows us that it was able to do that last stop. So if we wanted to log this, it would have logged it to a database, and then it would display the message for the user, and great things are happening. So maybe in this case right here, we could say, to make it real logistic, we could put console.log, and we could put saved, or I'll put export it, error message to logging. And then maybe here you could have sorry, we have an issue, and we'll be back soon. Something like that. So now if we run this, save it, run it, we pick up our error message, and we tell people export error message to logging. That shows that we logged it. Then we have a nice pretty message that says, sorry, we're having an issue, we'll be back soon. Because we don't want to display delete account is not defined to the user. You never want to put the exact error message to the user. You want to have a friendly message around that error message, something maybe that pertains to what's happening, but in a better terminology. Something random, like we're doing some upgrading or whatever. I get that. I worked in a call center a long time ago, and that was a thing that we had to tell our the tier 1 members. We had to tell them, hey, if we're updating the system, you have to let customers know that we're updating the system. And man, people will be like, who updates the system at 2 p.m. on a Monday? Come on. And they're right. It just meant we were down for a while. But this is a friendly way of getting that out there. Any questions around that? All right. That is it on error messaging. Pretty straightforward, not too much, but just a little bit of something here. These would be the key ones. Would be around finally and try.
Catch just displays like the generic error message, and then finally displays whatever you want.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So catch is, well, it doesn't. I won't say catch gets a general it gets whatever the system is providing. So that error message is exactly coming from the system. But finally is if you want to do a final step. So let's say like you want to save the error message to a folder on your hard drive, so that you know if it happens again, you're like, oh, I knew this happened. I remember how I resolved it. Or you want to, if it's a user screen, maybe you want to display a message for the users because you don't want them, they see that yucky message. Maybe you want it to redirect somewhere to a happy place. Maybe you redirect them to Disney World or something like that. That's what that's for. Does that help? Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm still confused on it.
Okay.
So, what's the difference between like the double mark and then just the single mark?
Where do you see double mark at?
Like the quotation and like the console log up top, like starting the engine up.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Out the
That was stupidity by me. I could have used double mark or single. So if you remember, I think it was in week 1 we talked about you could use double quotations or single in your literal message. The only time that you could use, you don't want to do like, I could do this. I could do a single like this, and I could do a double. You don't want to do that. You have to use one or the other. The only time that you could do that is if you're using, like, say you're spelling something out, it has apostrophe, like IT apostrophe S, then you want to use double quotes and then use that tick in there. Either of them work. You just don't want to, like for example, I did the singles up here, and okay, so I had the doubles up here, and I'm happy you brought that up. This right here is not a good idea because it works. I'm doing double quote, but then I'm doing single quote down here. So this is a bad practice. So you want to keep to the same practice. So me not doing my job, so I should have did single, and I should have did the same thing here when I was specifying the value. So you want to keep everything consistent.
Alright.
Is that
I didn't know if there was something with like the finally that you had to do something different.
No, that's a great question. I didn't even pick up on it, but it still works. I think. Yep. Yeah, it still works the right way. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
This goes for like our assignment. For this, do you want us putting it on like every part of the assignment, or you just want it like at least once in part of it?
Great question. Only put it where something is going to be executed. So when I say executed, when something, you're going to call something to do something. So if you're doing an if condition statement, maybe you would probably want, let's see, I'll throw up an example here. Let's go, let me pull up a screen here. So let me pull up Sublime real quick. And so let's say that we were doing a if condition. So you would have your try here, like let's copy this real quick. So you would do this like that. And then let's say that you're doing a if statement. So you're saying if value, we'll just say football, we'll just say age. Age is equal or greater than or equal to 22, then something happens. I want to say then. It's wrong anyways. If age is greater or equal to 22, and then say, yeah, and then something happens there, console.log something. It doesn't matter, I spelled it wrong. So you would want to have a condition, and you would want to have this try catch here. But let's say that you got that done, you got that, and then you came up down here and you wanted to call a function. You would want to do the same thing down here. So I don't know if this answers your question. You want to have a try catch finally everywhere that you try to execute something. So anytime that you're doing something, you're doing a conditional statement. If you're doing, if you're adding something up, let's say you're doing a formula, and let's say the formula blows up for whatever reason, you want to have that try catch in there so that if it does blow up, you want to capture that error message. Another good thing, I didn't even think about mentioning this, is let's say that this is the conditional statement here, and you do the error message. You could also do, when you do the console.log error, you could add on to it, you could maybe say plus where it happened at. So you could say it's the conditional statements. So that way, if you have a certain area set up, you're like, okay, that was in my conditional statements. I know where that's at. It's just more of an add-on to allow you to hurry up and identify where that code's at.
Is that like concatenating the error message with?
It is, yeah. So it's the error message plus you could put something there that something specific. This is for section initial statements or something like that. So do the try catch finally anywhere that you're doing something, so that way if it blows up, you're capturing it, and you will find people that'll say, oh, you don't need all that, it's too much, but you do, because anything can blow up. Does that answer your question? Anyone else have any questions? All right, so I'm gonna stop the share and stop the recording. I didn't have it here.